I became in love with real estate. I dove head first, and I said, I'm gonna do this one way or another. I traded jobs. I got a job that would give me 1 day a week back to my schedule so that I could pursue my real estate goals.
Welcome to the Break Free Real Estate Podcast, your guide to financial freedom through real estate. I'm your host, Jocelyn Kaufman, and today I'm here with Jaiden Olsen. Jaiden, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Jocelyn. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, of course. Let's just start this off by you telling the guests what your current portfolio looks like.
Yeah, currently my portfolio, we just finished liquidating a whole bunch of stuff through 21 and 22. We hold 10 cabins, so short-term rentals up in Kenai, Alaska. And we're also doing a fair bit of development right now. So we've got 32 acres in northern Utah that we're putting single-family homes on. And we are under contract to purchase another 256 acres in southeastern Idaho that we'll be putting single-family homes on. And we're also working on a 50-unit apartment complex in southeastern Idaho as well. So
wow, that's a lot. So congrats to you. So you say
you.
are you with a company? Is it you and your?
I am currently by myself, but I do syndicate a lot of my deals. So when I say we, it's me and my LPs, my passive partners.
Awesome. So this podcast is mainly for the beginner investors. So we're going to rewind way back to when you started. And let me ask you this. Why did you get started in real estate?
That's a great question. And I love that this is a beginner podcast because I am still very much a beginner and I'm still learning a ton. I got started in real estate because I graduated from Utah State University with a 7-year master's degree and started working a full-time career as a structural engineer, making $41,600 a year, 60 hours a week, 2 weeks paid vacation with a wife and a kid. And I said, this is not the lifestyle that I signed up for. So I started looking for a passive income opportunities. Found this guy named Robert Kiyosaki, started reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, Bigger Pockets podcast, all the audiobooks, all the podcasts, and I became in love with real estate. I dove head first, and I said, I'm gonna do this one way or another. I traded jobs. I got a job that would give me 1 day a week back to my schedule so that I could pursue my real estate goals. Called over 3,000 apartment complex owners and bought my first sixplex in 2018 on a seller finance deal with 2% down, 4% interest only financing with a 10-year balloon. And that's how I got started in real estate. And that was not that long ago.
That's awesome. That is a great deal. So if you want to sell it to me for 4% down.
Oh, well, like I said,
5%
I just ended
interest
up
rate.
selling. That's right. Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
I sold it last year. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Good for you. I am super excited to analyze these deals, but first, do you want to kind of tell the listeners a little bit about your personal life? You mentioned a wife, kids.
Yeah, I grew up in a small town in central Utah. Grew up doing construction with my dad and working on the family farm. I learned a lot of skills. My parents were real estate investors without really knowing it. We were live-in flippers. Moved 18 times before I turned 16, and so I learned how to manage projects and gained a real love for the construction process. I met my wife at Utah State. We've been married for 9 years now. We have 3 boys, ages 6, 4, and 1. And so we're right in the heat of things with the kids' sports and figuring out school schedules and the life of parents, I guess. But it's so fun. We love to go fishing, play sports outside. We just spent a week out in St. George at the Sports Village complex where we played basketball, tennis, hot tub, mini golf, pool every day. So it's an awesome vacation. We do enjoy getting out in the sun. I personally, I love to fish. I love to go to Alaska. I love to hunt and hike and bike and be outside, all things outdoors.
Awesome. So a couple questions from all that. Instead of regular chores, did you have to do construction growing up, or was it did your parents pay you for it, or was it kind of just expected, or kind of how was that structured growing up?
It's a great question. I grew up going out on the construction site with my dad when I was 7 years old during the summers, and I would get paid. I think I started out like a quarter an hour just picking up garbage and putting it in the dumpster. And then as I grew up, I got my apprentice electrician license at the age of 16 and became a proficient electrician. Oddly enough, 2009, I was going to continue in the electrical business, but there was no jobs to be found. So I ended up going back to school, and that's what propelled me back into the education system. But I did grow up. My grandpa had the farm, and a lot of his sons were managing the farm. My dad didn't, and we were all in the same community. So I did construction in the summertime, and then all winter I milked cows, bucked hay, changed sprinklers, and lived the farm lifestyle. So my chores weren't necessarily normal. Some of them I got paid for, and some of them were just expected.
That's awesome. Okay. And then my second question, honestly, I don't even remember what it was. Oh yeah. When you buy properties, when you mentioned your
Yeah.
portfolio, do you kind of buy based off of like where you like to go vacation? So you said you have a bunch in Alaska. You love to fish in Alaska. So are
Yeah.
those two things correlated?
They
Or
are very much correlated, and I would say that that's more of a passion project. My investors are getting a great return. We target 15 to 20% annual returns. But for me, it was more about I want to take my boys up there and have a place to go fishing every year, and so that's kind of what drove that. I do
yeah,
like the short-term rental portfolio side of things because of that, the lifestyle that it provides. But as far as buying stuff, I'm moving more to development and large multifamily, and I like to buy in my backyard where I can at least drive to the property, check it out, and keep things moving. I had some pretty tough lessons in the last year about managing projects with contractors who were from a distance, and we lost quite a bit of money. So I said anything I can drive to, and I will only have contractors who live very close work on those types of properties.
awesome. That I think that's a good idea, especially when you're like managing other people's money. I feel like it would be hard to do that from a distance. So
Yes.
that's awesome. Next we are going to analyze like your first deal. So I'm assuming probably that sixplex that you got seller
Yeah.
financing on would be a great start. So
Perfect.
when you mentioned that you read Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is a great book. I grew up playing a game called Cash Flow
Cash flow.
by, yeah, have you
Mhm.
played that?
Yes, I have. Yep.
Yeah. So I like my parents, we always played it and my parents weren't in real estate. So uh and I never really had a goal to be in real estate, but that kind of like now that I think about it, I'm like, maybe that's a reason I got into real estate is that
Well,
game.
kudos to your parents. That's awesome.
Yeah. And so uh he's like obviously so many people like will list that book as the reason why they got into real estate. And
Yeah.
so you read the book. What in the book was like enlightening to you? Like what made you decide that this is what you needed to do?
Yeah. Well, I think it's definitions for me is the number one thing, right? Robert Kiyosaki talks about defining an asset and a liability. What's putting money in your pocket and what's taking money out of your pocket. And I realized quickly that the only asset that I have, I was trading my time for money, and it was my degree, my education. And that was the only asset that I had at the time of reading that book. And I said, I have to figure something else out. So that's one thing that really propelled me to find real estate because it does have that passive appeal. And I've learned since that real estate is not something that many people are successful at with the full passive model. Because it does take a skilled manager, and there's a lot of hands-on things that you need to be doing as a real estate investor to be successful. But asset and liability, anything that's putting money in my pocket is going to be an asset. Anything taking money out of my pocket is a liability.
Yeah, that's great. And I like what you said about because people a lot of times get into real estate thinking it's going to be passive, but most of the time you have to put in a lot of work, especially when you're starting out. In
Yeah.
order to get good deals, you have to put in a lot of work to find them. I mean, you can like have other people do the work for you and pay them, but I just um I'm a control freak, so I try to do as much myself as possible.
You and me
Um
both. Yeah.
that's awesome. So now you read the book, you got motivated, and you said you called what how many apartment
I
complexes
call
complexes?
I called 3,000 owners before I landed my first deal.
Wow.
I, yeah, it was a ton of work. Say we again, this is my wife and I at the time. We set a goal for key performance indicators that I was going to accomplish every day. I was calling on my lunch break. I was calling after I got home from work, and then on Fridays, my day off, I was calling all the time. I was not only calling, but I was sending letters. I was writing offers. I had key metrics that I had to hit on a daily basis and a weekly basis in order to consider my week a success, that I was pursuing my real estate goals. And I attribute those habits that I developed to be a large part of my success. Um, there's a ton that we can dive into on the how to call that many off-market apartment complex owners, and but frankly, it's never been easier. There's so many tools and resources online that you can find. Just follow the same model that a lot of these wholesalers use and apply it to the multifamily space. That's what I did. Yep.
Yeah. That's awesome. So when you called the person who ended up selling you your
Yeah.
sixplex, do you want to outline kind of how that conversation went, or how, like,
Yeah.
was it a one and done? Did you have to talk to him multiple times? Did you have to
Oh,
wait?
I think it's never a one and done deal. Real estate's a relationship game. Um, Oddly enough, I didn't find this seller through cold calling. I found this seller at a local real estate investor association meetup. But I gained a ton of experience at talking to people about real estate, analyzing deals, and having conversations with owners. And that's what I attribute my success to, is just going through the motions, having those conversations, and talking to lots of people. This seller, he and his wife were leaving on a mission for their church, and they were going to Germany for 2 years. The property was in Ogden. They were from Ogden, and he's like, I'm not sure how I'm going to manage this thing from halfway across the world. And I was like, well, hey, I got an idea. Why don't I buy it from you? You be my bank, and I'll pay you 22.40 a month for the next 10 years. And he's like, well, that's an interesting idea. I ended up presenting 3 different offers to him over the course of probably 6 weeks. Many lunch conversations. I spent money on lunch and yada yada. Um, but I presented a full cash offer, which means, like, the way I was writing these offers, I was bringing in a hard money lender on the deal, and so my offer to him was $425,000 cash. I can make that deal work, pay off my hard money, refinance, build the equity in the property, and move forward. Option two was I bring in a money partner. I had a potential partner who had $50,000 sitting in the bank. And so that was option two, is to bring that money down, raise the purchase price a little bit, and have the seller carry the rest of the balance. And so that one, I was able to dial in my numbers with my $0 a month cash flow to $500,000. And then the offer that he ended up accepting was one that I said, I can do this deal myself. I can borrow $10,000 from my home equity line of credit, put that as the down payment on the property, and then just put a bunch of sweat equity into the property, and just make sure that my rents were going to cover my expenses. And I was break even. But I said, if I can make that deal work, I know that I'll at least have an asset. I'll at least have property, and I'll at least be in the game. And so I was able to convince him to accept that offer. So on day one, I had $0 of cash flow, and we proceeded to dump everything that we could back into the property. I mean, I did a ton of work on my own. I ended up partnering on that one with my dad because he was interested, and I knew that he had the know-how and experience after doing a bunch of live-in flips to turn these units into productive assets. And over the course of the next 2 to 3 years, we took the gross rents, or the rents on each apartment, from about 425 to 525 up to 950 a piece. And so we almost doubled the rents on that property over 3 years, which, as you know, in commercial real estate, that's how you improve the equity in the property.
Yeah, that's awesome. Have you thought about like refinancing the property since then, or just keeping that interest rate and that good seller financing deal you have?
Yeah, we ended up selling in the spring of last year. We took the equity and rolled that into other projects. I learned a few things during the course of that project. One, a sixplex, yes, it's a commercial deal, but property management is still, it's not quite big enough to have really high top-notch property management. And so I've got my eyes set on 40 units and larger apartment complexes now, where I can afford to have on-site managers. And the amount of equity that we grew in such a short period of time, it is difficult not to just take that equity and roll it into the next project.
Yeah,
That's what we
that's
opted to
awesome.
do.
Awesome. Did you use a 1031 exchange to do that? Or did
We
you
tried
just,
and we failed, and then we ended up buying something else. So that's largely what what made our Alaska deal possible was that 10 units. And so now we're looking at this 50 unit apartment complex in northeastern Idaho. I'm actually headed up there later today. Sorry, southeastern Idaho.
Okay.
That'll be one thing that we acquire soon. But yeah, we failed. So that was another experience that I had learning about failing on a 1031, paying the taxes. So
Yeah, I sold one place, successfully did a 1031. It worked out great. I didn't have to pay taxes. On another
nice.
deal, couldn't find a place, and I was like, I don't need a 1031. I'll just pay the taxes. The amount of money I was making, I was like outside of the taxes, I was like, this isn't a lot,
Right.
until tax season came and I had to pay that money. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this
Yeah.
sucks. And so I learned the lesson the hard way too, to
Yeah.
have a
Well,
plan.
I don't think that it's the end of the world. I know a lot of guys that are
Mm-mm.
opting not to do the 1031 and going the cost segregation route. There's still a lot of tax savings strategies that you can implement, even if you do fail the 1031. So I think there's benefits both directions. And you can talk to your tax accountant or specialist on the best strategy. But I've heard arguments both ways, so it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, for sure. And too, like a lot of people, like the amount of money I was making on that deal was like, I was a teacher at the time. It was double my teacher's salary just on the one
Yeah.
deal. So it's like, and then the taxes that I had to pay were on top of that. And it was a lot of money to me, but it was still at the same time, I had to look at how much I made and not get
Yes.
greedy and just
Yeah.
focus on the good things. But honestly, I
Yeah.
probably would have tried to do a 1031 exchange, just because I'm planning on staying in real estate long term. And so
Absolutely.
it would
I
benefit me.
think I think a lot of real estate investors get hung up on taxes, and they don't realize that if you're going to be bankable, you have to pay taxes. And so there's a lot of
Yeah.
advantages to actually paying taxes and showing a profit and being bankable, so you can go buy the bigger, better deals
Yeah,
next
for
year. And I've
sure.
realized that this last few years as well.
Yeah, it's funny because the last guest we had on this podcast said the same thing. That was his biggest mistake. And he's like a tax guy, but not claiming income, like
Right.
showing his side businesses having a loss and making it a lot harder to qualify for,
Yeah.
um, for loans. And so that is one thing. If you do have side hustles, then you have to like claim your income and claim your
Right.
rental income, because first of all, you're probably going to get caught at some point, and second of all, it's just going to benefit you to grow even bigger.
Right.
So that was
And
great.
one thing that my accountant mentioned to me a few years ago when we were going through this process, he's like, let's use the losses to dial in your income. Where do you want your income to be over the next few years? And we can just spread out these losses over the long term. And so we decided that we wanted to dial our income into $250,000 a year, which is enough to qualify for all the loans that we wanted. And yeah, we're paying taxes, but we can kind of hit that sweet spot. So we're profitable year after year after year. And as a self-employed individual, that becomes very, very important if you're planning on taking loans from a bank.
Yeah, for sure. Having multiple tax years,
Yep.
showing a consistent income. So when you bought this property, when you were analyzing it,
Yep.
um, or even you can even talk about how you analyze properties now, but super basic, high level, what are what's your system when you're analyzing a property?
Yeah, I mean, after calling 3,000 people, I had it dialed in pretty well. I had a spreadsheet that I could have numbers ready to go during a conversation on a phone call. And this is, I mean, we're talking 10,000-foot view, huge, um, just sky high numbers, right? I just wanted to know if this is even a deal worth looking at while we're on the phone. And so gross rents is a big one. Purchase price, obviously, we have to dial that in where it needs to be. Taxes, insurance, repairs, maintenance, and then any CapEx, HOAs, utilities. Those are the basic ones. Everything else, I can throw a buffer number in there, and I typically say 5 to 10%, and at least get a conversation started. We don't have to be perfect on day one or on the first phone call. And I want to be able to analyze that deal quickly.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that it's perfect, but having numbers quick made me very competitive talking on the phone to sellers.
Yeah, for sure. And I think analytical people do really well in real estate because it is a numbers game.
Right.
And so if you, and I've said this before, like if you don't know how to use a spreadsheet, if you don't know like how to do these things, then you should take a course on it and get really good at it, because
Right.
that's going to help you so much in analyzing properties. I've made like countless spreadsheets. They save you so much time, especially
They
if you
do.
are able to automate a lot of it. And
Yep.
um it's an important tool to have as an investor.
Yep.
So when you took over the property,
Yep.
what did that process look like? Did you have to evict any tenants? Did you keep the same tenants? You said you've repaired a lot of the houses, a lot of the units.
Yeah.
So what did that process look like when the documents were signed and you were handed the keys?
Yeah, well, just to back up a little bit, I mean, getting over the fear of buying your first rental is a huge thing. We had meth problems that came back positive. We had repairs that were recommended to be done from our property inspector and all these other things. And so on day one, I mean, we were nervous that this was even going to be a good deal. But I did, like, bottom line is the numbers worked. I knew that the rents were low. I knew that there's market to raise them. And that was our plan, right? Um, so getting over that fear was a big thing. Day one, we got the keys. Uh, Tenants were all on month-to-month contracts, and I wouldn't even say that. I mean, there's a handful of them that were just handshake deals with the previous owner, right? No property management in place. So first thing that I did, I was working full time at the time, and I didn't want to deal with credit checks, background checks, keys, all these things. So I did hire a property manager, and for me, that was worth that 10% a month. I think we were down to 8% a month on property management fees, um, on that one, but it was worth it to me to get property management in place so that I didn't have to deal with it. And it helped my wife feel better about managing tenants in a Class C area, because of some things going on in the news and everything else. It's always, in my opinion, it's better to have somebody else do the dirty work than you. But we did have one unit that came up vacant about a month after we took over the property, and so we got in and renovated it. We've bought used appliances, we've bought used plumbing fixtures, used toilets, used bathroom or bathtubs. We even found some used flooring on a KSL, which is our local listing, like Craigslist, classifieds. And we found used flooring. There's like a LVP laminate that somebody took out, and we put it all in. So we did that. I mean, it's a 700 square foot apartment that we probably renovated for $12,000, like, cost. That was everything, cabinets, everything. 2 bed, 1 bath, and we did all the work ourselves. And fortunately, we had the background and the experience to do those things, but that's still really cheap. And I'm proud of us for getting through that first unit and actually turning a profit. Because with that first unit, we made, like, we went from $0 cash flow to about 200-300 bucks a month positive cash flow, which, again, we just dumped right back into the property, but we proved that we were going to make money, which is a huge success for us.
Yeah. Two things I really like in that. I think a lot of people like put shame on like C class rentals, but in my opinion, like C to B class are the best type of rentals, because
Yeah.
you can renovate them inexpensively and you can still find good renters within that class.
Yep.
And most of the time you're going to see more return. If you like the lower class you go, the
Absolutely.
more
Yeah.
return you see. And it doesn't mean you have to be a slumlord. Like, make a nice place and you'll get a good tenant in that rental
Right.
class, and that's like the most important thing. And the next thing is get you like using getting used materials. I do that all the time on my properties. I've never bought an appliance new, because appliances don't last that long. So I have
Yeah.
a used appliance store that I work with, and they go and deliver them and install them. And
Yeah.
I haven't had one of those used appliances break.
It's
And
awesome.
I've never done flooring, but cabinets, you can always find those on like your local classifieds. You can always find cabinets that are in good shape, that people are just
Absolutely.
trying to redo their kitchen. Or I've
Yep.
even got like a whole cabinet set and countertop and sink that's super nice for like 150 bucks. Like, always
Oh
keep an
yeah.
eye out for.
A lot of them like, it's $100. You come and tear it out and haul it off, which is totally fine. You get a full cabinet set for $100. I mean, you can find some of these bigger kitchens that people just move in and don't like the cabinets that were installed last year, and you can probably furnish 2 to 3 units with the cabinets you pull out of one kitchen.
Yeah, and I just have an alert on my phone anytime something's listed in, the area with
Yeah,
um that has to do with something that I may need, and I have a garage and I just put like stuff in there. And I think a lot of
that's
people
cool.
don't think about that as an option when
Right.
they're looking at their cost to renovate something. It's expensive, like, and it's not doable for like the average person trying to get into real estate investing.
Yeah.
Most of the time, they don't have a ton of money to renovate a project. And so that's
Right.
always an option. And going back to what you said about being fearful, most people like don't even take the first step because they feel like they can't do it or because they feel like it's impossible or out of reach. But
Oh
as
yeah.
soon as you take that first step, it becomes that much more possible. And buying your first investment is terrifying.
Yeah.
You feel like you're gonna throw up. You're all the cons are like going through your head,
Yeah.
and but then you just have to take a step back, trust in your analyzation, like how you analyze the property,
Yep.
um, and trust yourself and just go with it. So that was a
Absolutely. And I think with that, I mean, with that uncomfortableness, if you can get over that, the growth and the confidence comes later. And that's one thing that I can't harp on enough. Like confidence building experiences are huge. If you can prove to yourself that you can do one deal, you can do 100.
awesome. So great insight on that first deal. It seems like it was a really good deal for you. So
Yeah.
congrats to you. Um, we're gonna end the show with some final questions. And
Yep.
the first one is just what is your biggest mistake? Like what out of everything you've done in real estate, what's been your biggest mistake?
That's a great question. It's been an interesting few years, as everybody knows in real estate. We saw a market where we couldn't lose. Anything we bought turned to gold, almost like Midas touch. And then 2022 hit, and it became challenging. A lot of people lost a lot of money. 2021, I had a business partner at the time. We bought a 4,000 square foot home in a upper class neighborhood in North Salt Lake with the idea that we were going to flip it. The idea was to get into that higher end luxury space so that we could ditch a lot of the competition that was going on in that two to $400,000 property range. The biggest downside to this project is that it needed about $700,000 of renovation. That we were going to add a 3,000 square foot addition and turn this into a $1.9 million property, um, which is awesome. The comps were right in that neighborhood. Were looking really good at the time. Excuse me. And so we decided to tackle it. We paid cash for this property in 2021. We got a home equity line of credit that was going to cover the first $400,000 of renovation, and then we ended up needing another $300,000 so that we brought in a second position hard money lender. Construction prices went like this. Cost, labor, everything went through the roof. Um, Over the course of the next 18 months, we spent over $1.1 million on renovation on that house. And the timelines, everything that we learned, that was I mentioned earlier, having contractors living close to the property that can work on it. It took us 18 months to flip that property. I mean, it's 3,000 square foot addition, essentially building a new house. We had tons of learning experiences. We way overspent, went way over our time budget, and we lost $350,000 on that one flip last year. That was a big learning lesson, and it was the first time that I ever lost money. So I can officially tell myself that I'm an experienced investor. But I'm really proud of the things that we learned. None of our investors lost money. We paid out full returns to our uh, partners, everything. Um, and I just paid for a really expensive education in real estate. And I'm really fortunate that a loss that size didn't sink my ship because I know a lot of people are really hurting in this market. And we're just on to bigger and better deals. And there's so much opportunity out there. If I let a loss like that scare me from buying my next deal, there's never any way that I'm going to recover from it. So we're just out there hustling, getting bigger, better deals, and just taking that loss in stride.
Yeah, for sure. And just knowing that there are going to be more and they'll average out. Like, especially in
Absolutely.
the flipping business, you are going to lose. That's just the reality of it. When you're buying a house, you can't see everything and predict everything that's going to happen if
Yep.
like when you're flipping. And so if that's the route you're going, you have to be prepared to lose or break even. Like, and you should be thankful when you break even and
That's right.
like and manage your money as such. When you do really good and get like a huge return, like
Yeah.
manage that well to balance out those losses. That was a great lesson that you shared with everyone. Next question, what do you wish you knew before you even got started in real estate?
Um, yeah. Before I got started in real estate, I was 2014, 2015. I wish that I would have known more about real estate. I think the networking and education is some of the best investments that you can make. I spend more on coaching now than I have ever in the past because I've recognized the importance it is to have coaches. I mean, we've lost lots of money on due diligence and deals, and finding people that have gone through what you're wanting to do and paying them to do it, so you don't have to pay for the price of those lessons, is super valuable. I mean, if I would have hired a flipping coach on buying a property and doing a 3,000 square foot addition, they probably would have said that's probably not a great idea, and I probably could have saved myself a lot of time, headache, and let alone opportunity costs that project cost us. Yeah, hire a coach. Don't be afraid to spend the money on the education. Um, that's probably what I would tell myself.
I think that's a really good point, and that's something we haven't really touched on a lot through our episodes thus far. So I think that is great advice. Hire a coach. You have even like you can pay for sit downs for like an hour sit down for someone to just
Yeah.
walk you through and discuss with you, and those typically are like $100. So
And even
um
if it's like just for one deal, if you want to call somebody and say, hey, talk to me about this deal, totally worth the money, regardless of what
yeah,
you're paying, frankly.
yeah. Awesome. I love that. And next question, favorite real estate book? Is it Rich Dad Poor Dad or do you have another one?
Ooh, Rich Dad Poor Dad definitely set me on fire, and that has a soft spot in my heart. But I'm gonna say Big Money, Small Apartments. Um, I'm forgetting the author on that one. Big
It's
Money,
okay.
Small Apartments is the how-to on everything small apartments. And I could go back to that book and learn the whole system all over again. Great book.
Awesome. I've never read that. I'll have to check it out, and I will link to it in the show notes. So anyone who wants to check that book out, then you can go to the show notes and find it. And then final question, how can our listeners connect with you?
Yeah, follow me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is at Jaiden Olsen 23. You can message me and reach out. I'd love to get to know you guys.
Awesome. And we will put that in the show notes as well. And Jaiden, thank you so much for being on the show today. It was a pleasure learning about your story and everything that you've accomplished. And I think that you're a great example to someone who is thinking about getting started or doesn't know where to start. Like you just did it and now you have a career out of it and
That's right.
seems like a lucrative career out of it. So
We're
you've
having
done
fun.
great. And, I think that it's going to be very valuable for our listeners to listen to this episode. So, do
Awesome.
you have
Thanks so
any
much for
final
having me.
thoughts? Okay,
Nope, grateful
awesome.
for the opportunity.
Thank you. That's it for today. For more daily investing tips and real estate secrets, don't forget to visit breakfreerealestate.com and make sure to like, subscribe, and share our podcast. We will see you tomorrow.